Hi, I'm Jason Duro. I'm a fantasy author, and today I'm going to talk to you about chips and salsa. I love both the chips and the salsa, but if I'm being honest with you, the salsa is kind of the star of the show. Now, I like chips. Chips are great, and they're even better when they're just the right level of crunchiness and when they have that scoopable shape that you can get right in the bowl and get the salsa. But really, the chips are just a vehicle to get the salsa out of the bowl and into my mouth. And similarly, it's great to have solid characters and plots and settings in your writing, but those are all just really delivery mechanisms as well. They're not delivering salsa to your readers, wouldn't that be great? But they are delivering something that just might be even better than salsa, if you can believe that. They are bringing your readers emotion. No matter what the medium or form or structure or genre is, all art really comes down to emotions. A songwriter creates music so that they can inspire emotion in the listener. A sculptor will create a statue to invoke emotion in the observer. And we as writers will create our stories and write our books to invoke an emotion in our readers and make them feel something. It doesn't matter whether you're writing a murder mystery or an epic fantasy or a spicy romance. Chances are, when you're writing, you're trying to evoke an emotion in your reader and make them feel something. And more often than not, the emotion you want them to feel is very similar to the emotion that you felt when you were creating those characters or writing those scenes. So, in a very real way, what writing fiction is you as a writer feeling something and then finding a way to package that and structure it in the optimal way that you can transmit that long distance and convey that same emotion in someone else that you might not even know and might not even ever meet. And even if you're not consciously aware that you're doing that, everything that you write, when someone reads it, is going to inspire some kind of emotion in that person. And similarly, every time a reader reads a piece of fiction, they're going to feel something. There's some emotion they're going to pull out of that, even if they're not really consciously aware of that themselves. The emotion might be joy. It might be a feeling of fantasy fulfillment. It could be sadness, or it could be a feeling of depression or depth. It could even be suspense or fear. And those are two really interesting ones, suspense and fear, because people read thriller books, they'll read horror books to feel suspense and fear, and it seems like that's what they're really going for, but really that's not the emotion that they're trying to get out of it, and that's not the emotion that is optimal to get from those. What they really want is the release of the tension at the end. It's the catharsis. And so in that way, it's important when you're writing these things to be aware of what kind of emotion the reader really expects, even if they're not aware of it, and to gear things toward that and to intentionally build toward setting things up for the reader to feel that emotion that they want out of it and that you want to convey to them. And that brings us to the next point, which might be the most important point in all of this, and that's that when you are writing, you need to be aware and make yourself aware of specifically what emotion you want to inspire in the reader. Doing that will give you a goal and give you even a path and a method to get to the point where you can optimally cause the reader to feel that right emotion that you want them to feel. Once you do that, you can make sure that every sentence you write, every character development, every decision they make in the story, every plot turn is driving towards making the reader eventually feel that emotion that you want them to feel and that you've set them up to feel. In situations where you're not aware of it, when the writer isn't as conscious of what emotion they're driving towards, they might set the reader up to expect a certain emotion, and then in the end, they pay off with a completely contradictory emotion. And in those situations where that's done unintentionally, those are times when readers can feel disappointed, they can feel misled, or they can feel like something is just off with the story. They might not be able to put their finger on it, but they can tell that something has gone awry somewhere and that something unintentional has happened in the story. So it's really important to focus and make yourself aware of what emotion you want to drive toward so that you're not just veering all over the place, so you can be focused and you can have a goal and head towards that emotion. Even if you're a discovery writer and you don't know the specific scenes and steps that are going to lead to it, you can be consistent emotionally when you're bringing the emotion to your reader. Always be intentional and aware of what you're doing as far as the emotions go. For example, if you're writing a fantasy story and the emotion that you want to inspire in the reader is a sense of wonder, you might do something like put a character into the story that doesn't understand the fantasy world and is experiencing all the fantasy aspects of it at the same time that your reader is, and the character will be feeling this sense of wonder, and if you have connected that character to the reader enough and do a good enough job of conveying that sense of wonder, that will transmit right over to the reader, and the reader will feel that wonder right alongside the character. Similarly, if you're writing some sort of tragedy, if you're writing a tragic romance or something that has a sad ending that you want the reader to feel sad and be left with that bad feeling, you mean writer, you have to set that up as well. And the way to do that is to make connections between the reader and the characters, make the reader invest in the relationship or in the stakes, whatever you've said is the stakes for the story, and make the reader feel ahead of time that if the plot goes in this direction and things don't work out, it's going to feel really badly, that that's the worst case scenario for these characters that the reader already cares about. You need to set it up so that when the bottom does fall out and the worst case scenario happens, when the relationship falls through, when the characters don't make it, when whatever happens, the reader is already primed to have this feeling, to have the emotion that you want them to have, and once that happens, they will be ready to feel that emotion and they'll have been set up for that, and it comes to them so much easier at that time. And the most effective way to do all this, and the most effective way to have those big emotional moments hit just right, is to do the prep work. It's to do the setup and to anticipate what you want the reader to feel, so you do the work ahead of time to make the reader invest in what you're building and make the reader anticipate the climax, make the reader anticipate the emotion that they're going to feel ahead of time. That doesn't mean you need to give things away. That doesn't mean you can't surprise and have a plot twist or something like that in the story. Those are great to have, but you need to set the reader up so that in some way you have prepared them, you've primed them to feel those emotions, and you need to have things consistent through the story so that when you hit the climax, you're delivering that promise that you've made to the reader. If you set it up just the right way and get buy-in from the reader early on, the heavy lifting is really in that part. It's getting all the things set up. It's lining up the dominoes. Then when you hit the climax and you have that moment where you push the button and want the reader to feel the emotion, that's the part that's easy. That's just knocking over the first domino, and you can sit back and watch the rest of them fall because you've already set the reader's expectations, you've primed them with their emotions, and you just hit that button and they feel the emotions at that point because you've done the prep work. So to sum all this up, everything you write is going to inspire some kind of feeling in a reader. It's going to inspire some kind of emotion. So you need to select and be intentional about what that emotion is, and you need to be aware of it as you're writing so that you can have a goal and drive toward that emotion. And the best way to set up the emotion for the reader to feel it when you want them to, at the climax, at the end of the story, wherever that big emotional payoff moment is to do the setup, do the preparation work, and prime the reader so that when you do push that button and it's time for them to feel the emotion, it comes through in the optimal way and it hits as hard as it possibly can and has the most effect on the reader that you could possibly have. Keep all this in mind the next time you're writing, and I think you might be surprised with how much better all of those emotional beats can land once you put all this into practice. Let me know in the comments if you're already focusing on this or if you're putting it into action and how it goes. I'd love to hear from you and hear if this helps. And if it does help, please give me a like on this video. That always helps me. And remember to subscribe so you won't miss any of my upcoming videos.